My name is Harold Brown, and I turned 73 last spring. I live in a small coastal town where gulls scream louder than the church bells and where every morning smells like wet salt and half-forgotten promises. After my wife Mary passed away, I sold the house and moved to a smaller one near the edge of the ocean. People said it was too quiet for an old man, but that was the point. I needed the quiet to remember her voice. For 35 years I worked as a mail carrier. Rain, snow, wind, didn't matter. I delivered letters written by people who still believed words could reach someone's heart. And maybe that's why it felt poetic. That one morning, long after retirement, a letter came for me. A letter with no return address, yellowed by time and sealed with wax the color of rust. The name on the envelope was my own. But the handwriting, it was hers, Mary's. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks. I sat by the window, trembling a little, and stared at it like it might vanish if I blinked. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sentence. If you ever feel lost, follow the rails back to Willow Creek. That's all. No date, no signature. But I didn't need either. I knew that handwriting as well as I knew the rhythm of her laughter. Willow Creek, the place where we first met, during a summer that smelled of lemonade and diesel. She was working at a cafe near the old station. I was the rookie mailman who forgot his bag there 3 times just to see her smile. We promised to go back someday when the world stopped rushing. We never did. Life pulled us into its usual chaos, bills, broken cars, birthdays, hospital rooms, and then, one quiet evening, she was gone. I kept her photo on the nightstand, and every night I'd whisper goodnight as if she were only a dream away. But that letter, it felt like more than nostalgia. It felt like a direction. So I packed a small bag, some clothes, her photo, and the compass she'd given me on our first anniversary. It hadn't pointed north for years. The needle just trembled, as if confused about which way home really was. I told no one. Didn't want to hear my neighbor tell me about grief hallucinations or closure exercises. Some journeys you don't explain. You just go. At dawn, I walked to the nearest station. The clerk looked at me like I'd asked for a ticket to Neverland. Willow Creek, she repeated. That line's been closed since 1989. She shrugged. No trains go there anymore. But when she turned away, I noticed something strange. On the departure board, among digital schedules and commuter trains, a single line flickered for a moment. Willow Creek, Platform 4, 6:52 a.m. Then it blinked out. My watch read 6:51. Instinct, or maybe fate, pushed me forward. I ran down the corridor, past vending machines and empty benches, until I saw it. An old green train with gold letters on the side. WCRR, Willow Creek Railroad, the company that shut down decades ago. A conductor in an immaculate uniform stood by the door. Young, maybe 20, with eyes that seemed much older than his face. His badge read E. Turner. "Ticket, sir?" he asked politely. "I don't have one," I said out of breath. He smiled. "You already paid." "Long ago." And he stepped aside. The door closed behind me with a sigh. The air smelled of cedar and dust, seats of red velvet, lamps of brass, windows fogged by their own memories. The train started moving, smooth and steady. Through the window, landscape slipped by, fields, forests, rivers, but no people. Just a motion that felt like time itself exhaling. I sat there for what could have been minutes or hours. The rhythm of the wheels felt like a heartbeat I'd forgotten. Then I saw her. A woman sitting across the aisle wearing a green coat and holding a hat box. 60 maybe, calm, with that look of someone who had learned to carry silence without letting it crush her. "Going to Willow Creek?" I asked. She nodded. "My sister lived there, long time ago." Her eyes met mine, and for a second I thought I saw Mary. Not exactly, but close enough to make my chest ache. And when the train finally slowed down, the conductor reappeared. "We've arrived, sir. You know where to go." I wanted to ask, how could I? But before I could speak, the doors opened, and a soft fog rolled in. I stepped onto the platform. The train pulled away without a sound, no whistle, no smoke, and then it was gone. The station looked like something out of a photograph. Paint peeling, sign half missing, but every detail exactly as I remembered. And the air smelled like 1971, like rain and cinnamon, and the first day I met her. I walked toward town, past the old lighthouse, past the cafe that, impossibly, still stood. Inside, a record played "What a Wonderful World," and behind the counter stood a woman who looked exactly like Mary, only younger, 30 maybe. "Coffee, Mr. Brown?" she said, smiling. I froze. "Do I know you?" She tilted her head, amused. "Everyone here knows you. You used to sit right over there." She pointed to a small table by the window. Our table. I sat down, heart pounding. On the table lay a faded photograph. Me and Mary, laughing, the lighthouse behind us. On the back, written in her handwriting, "Willow Creek, August 1981, our place." That night, I stayed in the old motel at the edge of town. I dreamed of her voice, calling my name between the hum of the waves. When I woke, a note lay on the nightstand. "Don't leave until you see the light on the hill." So I packed my things and headed toward the lighthouse, the same one from the photograph. And that's where I met the young photographer named Sam. He said he was working on a project called The Second Ticket. Stories about people who kept a promise, even decades later. And somehow he already knew my name. When I first met Sam, I thought he was one of those restless kids who see beauty everywhere except in the moment they're living. But the way he looked at the world, it wasn't the distracted gaze of youth. It was focus, the kind people get only after they've lost something. He held his old camera like it was a living thing. The lens was scratched, the strap patched with tape, but it felt real, like him. "You're Harold Brown," he said, as if he'd been expecting me. "You were the mailman who used to walk the Ridge Road. My grandfather talked about you." "Your grandfather?" I asked, squinting. He smiled faintly. "Edward Turner. He worked as a conductor for Willow Creek Railroad." My chest tightened. The name on the badge. The same young man who had stood at the door of that impossible train. I wanted to say something, but words stumbled over disbelief. Sam noticed. "Yeah," he said quietly. "People still talk about that last train. They say it came for the ones who kept their promises." He reached into his bag and pulled out a worn envelope. "I think this belongs to you." Inside was a photograph, me and Mary laughing near the lighthouse. The same picture I'd seen in the cafe, except this one wasn't faded. It was new. "I found it here," Sam said, pointing toward the rocks below the lighthouse. "It was sealed inside a glass jar. The tide must have brought it in." I turned the photo over. On the back, written in Mary's neat cursive, "If you find this, it means the tide kept its word." I couldn't breathe. Sam spoke again. softer this time. I'm working on a collection of stories. I call it The Second Ticket. It's about people who still have something left to finish. And you think that's me? I asked. He smiled, a kind, knowing smile. I don't think, I know. We climbed the narrow stairs of the lighthouse. Each step groaned under our weight, like it was remembering other visitors from long ago. At the top, sunlight flooded the glass room. Dust danced in the air, suspended in golden quiet. There, under a table, sat a small iron box. Sam lifted it carefully and handed it to me. "Go ahead," he said. The lock gave way easily. Inside were 3 things: a journal, a compass, and a thin strip of paper, tied with a blue string. Sam untied it gently. Names filled the page, hundreds of them, each followed by a short note. Louise Gray, waiting for her brother's reply. Evan North, promised to finish the bridge. Mary Brown, promised to return to the sea. When I read that last line, my voice caught. "You knew her?" I asked. Sam nodded. "Not personally, but everyone in this town remembers her laughter. They say when she passed, the lighthouse light dimmed for a whole week." He picked up the compass from the box and handed it to me. The metal was cold, but the engraving on its back felt familiar. WCRR. The same initials from the train. I flipped it open. The needle trembled, then pointed, not north, but toward the ocean. Sam leaned against the window frame. "Willow Creek has 2 schedules," he said. "One written in timetables and one in people's hearts. When those 2 align, something opens." I laughed softly. "That's the kind of story my wife would have believed." "Then maybe she still does," he replied. We spent the day walking through the town. Every corner was a memory resurrected. The bench near the bakery, the old library steps, the path where Mary used to leave wildflowers in my pockets just to see if I'd notice. At the cafe, the young woman from the day before waved us over. "Morning, Mr. Brown," she said. "The usual?" Her bracelet caught the light, a small silver charm with the letter M. "Your name's Marin, right?" I asked. She nodded. "Named after my mom. She loved this town. Said it had a way of bringing people back to what mattered." Her words sank into me like warm rain. When she left, I turned to Sam. "She reminds me of Mary, the way she moves. The way she says things that sound simple but aren't." Sam smiled. "Maybe that's why you're here, to see that love doesn't vanish. It just changes its handwriting." Later, we visited the Willow Creek Historical Room. The curator, Eleanor Turner, greeted us. She was an elderly woman with gentle eyes and a voice like soft paper. "My son Edward," she said, "used to work on the railroad. The last run he ever made was in 1989. He told me once, 'Mom, that train isn't just for travelers. It's for those still searching for the place they promised to return to.'" She handed me an old file. Inside were newspaper clippings, maps, and a letter I'd forgotten we ever wrote. "Dear Willow Creek, we promise to return when we finally learn not to postpone happiness. Harold and Mary Brown." My knees almost gave out. The signature, it was hers. The ink, still a little smudged, as if she'd been laughing when she'd signed. Eleanor touched my shoulder gently. "In this town, time doesn't erase. It just folds. You're here because your promise finally unfolded?" Before sunset, Sam took me back to the lighthouse hill. The light hadn't been working for years, but that evening It glowed faintly, like a heartbeat remembered. "This is where we end most stories," Sam said, "right before they begin again." He lit a small candle and placed it near the old railing. "I come here to give things back to the sea," he said quietly. "Regrets, fears, half-told stories." "What are you giving tonight?" I asked. He smiled. "My fear of not finishing something I start." I thought for a while, then said, "I'll give away my habit of waiting for perfect moments." They never come. The candle flame flickered as if it understood. Down below, in the fading light, a figure appeared. Marin, climbing up the path with something wrapped in cloth. "I knew you'd be here," she said. "Found this in the basement of the cafe. Looks like it's yours." She handed me a small photo album, the same kind Mary used to make, pages filled with handwritten notes and old pictures. On the first page was a hand-drawn map of Willow Creek, arrows pointing to spots labeled "Our Bench," "Library," "Where You Laughed Until You Fell." Between the pages lay a train ticket, round trip, stamped Willow Creek Railroad. On the back, in Mary's handwriting, "If you ever forget where home is, it's wherever the light still waits for you." I closed the album and looked toward the sea. The lighthouse beam swept across the water, and for a brief second I swore I saw her, standing at the shoreline smiling. Then the wave rolled in, and she was gone. But the light remained. The next morning began with fog, not the heavy kind that smothers everything, but the soft, silver kind that turns the world into memory. You could taste the salt in it. You could almost hear whispers from the sea if you stood still enough. I woke before sunrise and walked down to the station. The platform was empty, the benches slick with dew. Even the clock above the ticket window was frozen. Hands stuck forever at 6:52. That same time I'd seen on the board the day the train came. When I turned, I saw Sam standing by the edge of the tracks. He was filming, camera steady in his hands. "You're early," he said. "Old habits," I replied. "Mailmen and ghosts. We both wake before dawn." He smiled, but his eyes were tired. "You feel it too, don't you?" "Feel what?" "That something's about to happen." "The kind of thing you can't rewind." I nodded, because deep down I knew. Something was circling back, not just for me, but for all of us. We sat on the platform in silence. The town was still half asleep. Even the gulls seemed to be whispering. Sam broke the quiet first. "You know, my grandfather, Edward Turner, he told me stories about the Willow Creek line, said sometimes trains came for one person only. The schedule never showed up, but the ones who needed it always knew when to be here." I chuckled. "Sounds like a fairy tale." He shrugged. "Maybe, but what if fairy tales are just things we forgot how to explain?" Before I could answer, a low sound rolled through the air, a distant rumble. At first I thought it was thunder, but then I saw the light, a faint glow far down the tracks, growing stronger with every second. Sam slowly lowered his camera. "You hear that?" I did. The sound of metal, rhythm, and time, a heartbeat made of rails. The train. It pulled into the station without a sound of brakes, as if it had been gliding on memory alone. The same dark green engine, the same gold letters, WCRR. The door opened, and out stepped the same young conductor, Edward Turner, but not the way I remembered him. He looked real this time, not spectral, not dreamlike, just human, calm, and somehow older than before. "Mr. Brown," he said with a small nod, "you made it back?" I wasn't sure I ever left, I answered. He smiled faintly. Maybe none of us ever really do. Sam looked between us, confused. Wait, you know each other? Edward turned to him. In a way, every journey has two witnesses, the one who rides and the one who remembers. Sam blinked. You mean me? Edward didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked at me. You brought something with you, didn't you? I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope Mary had written, the one that started all this. The paper was soft, fragile, but still held her scent, that mix of lavender and wind. Edward nodded slowly. Then you already know what to do. We stepped inside the train together. The air was warm and smelled faintly of cedar again. But this time, it wasn't empty. Passengers filled the seats, people of all ages, all faces. Some I recognized from old photographs in town, some I didn't, but every one of them turned and smiled as I passed. They weren't strangers. They were memories, or maybe pieces of unfinished goodbyes. At the back of the car sat Mary. She looked the way she did when we first met. That same light in her eyes, that same quiet joy that made the world around her make sense. I froze. She tilted her head, smiled softly, and said, You took your time, Harold. I had to find the way, I whispered. You always did. I sat beside her. Her hand was warm, not imagined, not ghostly, just real. We sat like that for what felt like hours, saying nothing. There are no words left to say when love outlasts language. At last, she turned to me and said, It's not time yet. Time for what? To stay. You still have work to do, people to remind. And just like that, the light around her began to fade. The sound of the rails slowed, and when I blinked, the car was empty again. I stepped outside. The train was still there, but silent. Sam stood on the platform, camera raised, eyes wide. Did you see her? He asked. I nodded. Yes, and I think she saw me too. He looked down at his screen. There's something weird. The footage, it's all blank, except he turned the display toward me. In the corner of the frame, glowing faintly, was the reflection of Mary's face, smiling toward us. The timestamp read 6:52 a.m. We stood there long after the train vanished again into the mist. The tracks hummed quietly like they were remembering our footsteps. Sam broke the silence. Do you think it'll ever come back? I thought about it, then said, Maybe not for me, but maybe for someone else who kept a promise. He nodded slowly. Then I'll be here, with my camera, just in case. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You remind me of myself when I still believed in miracles. He smiled faintly. And you remind me of who I hope to become, someone who never stopped waiting for them. The gulls began to cry overhead. The morning sun pushed through the fog and the world turned gold again. As we walked back into town, something on the wall near the cafe caught my eye, a message written in chalk. Trains don't always take you away. Sometimes they bring you back. Beneath it was a small drawing, a heart, a compass, and a ticket stub. I took the piece of chalk and added a single word underneath. Home. That night, the lighthouse lit itself again. No one saw who fixed it. Some said the sea carried back its light. Others said it was Mary. All I knew was that when I looked at the beam stretching across the dark water, I felt peace. Not the hollow kind that comes from forgetting, but the full kind, the kind that comes from remembering everything and being grateful anyway. The compass in my pocket trembled once more and finally pointed north. I woke before dawn with a kind of clarity you don't argue with. The room was still, the ocean breathing beyond the window like a patient animal. I poured black coffee, slipped the old compass into my pocket, and took the envelope with Mary's handwriting. I didn't read it again. I already knew every curve of every letter. Some things you don't reread. You carry them. Outside Willow Creek was the color of pewter. Street lamps hummed. The bakery sent out that first warm ribbon of air that smells like forgiveness. At the station, mist drifted across the tracks as if time itself were exhaling. Sam was already there, camera on a strap, thermos in hand, eyes that hadn't learned to rest. "You're early," he said. "Since forever," I told him. Mailmen learn to arrive before the world remembers it needs them. We sat on the bench beneath the frozen clock, hands fixed at 6:52. No one had fixed it in years, which felt right. Some clocks tell a different kind of time. "You ever think," Sam asked, "that forgiveness is just giving the past a seat so it stops pacing the hallway?" "I think forgiveness is a platform," I said. "You don't chase trains. You wait where they can find you." He nodded. The mist thickened, then thinned, as if taking small, careful breaths. The rails began to hum, not loudly, not like a movie, just a sound you feel more than hear, a low iron heartbeat. Sam stood without thinking, and I felt my chest loosen the way it does when a pain finally admits it is leaving. Light down the line, a growing glow, green against the gray. And then the train, dark green body, gold letters, Willow Creek Railroad. It slid into the station as if it knew us. Perhaps it did. The door opened. The young conductor stepped forward, Edward Turner, cap at an angle, eyes kind with a discipline only service gives. "Mr. Brown," he said, like he was greeting a regular. "Mr. Sam, good morning." "Good morning," I answered. "You're right on time." He tilted his head toward the frozen clock. "We always are." I looked at Sam, then at the envelope in my hand. I had brought it for an answer. It had turned into a decision. "Son," I said softly, "this is yours." I held out Mary's letter, the one that had found its way back to me after so many ordinary and not so ordinary years. Sam didn't take it at first. "I can't," he whispered. "It's her." "It still is," I said. "And she's telling me what she's always told me. Don't make love bear more weight than it needs to. Pass it forward. Someone else is waiting for their second ticket. You'll know who." He swallowed hard, then accepted the envelope like you accept someone's last good word. The conductor watched us with a look I've only seen on men who learned that duty and mercy are not enemies. "Platform's open," Edward said gently. "Car's warm, seat by the window." I shook my head. "Not today." He didn't argue. "Another time, then." "Or another person," I answered. He smiled the way those who understand limits smile. "That's the railroader's secret, Mr. Brown. The tracks don't just carry people, they carry chances." The train waited a beat longer, as if listening for a name not yet spoken, and then slid away into the mist. No whistle, no spectacle, just departure. Sam's breath ghosted in the cool air. He stared at the envelope as if the ink might still be wet. "Why me?" he finally asked. "Because you're the one who remembers," I said, "and because remembering is a job, not a hobby." We stood there until the last thread of sound dissolved. Gulls called above us, and the town began to wake. Shutters opening, a broom swishing a front step, the soft rattle of cups in a cafe that knew how to hold stories without dropping them. "Come on," I said. "Work to do." Work turned out to be small things, the kind that stitched days together. We replaced the rusted nails on the station bench. We oiled the hinge on the historical room's glass case so it wouldn't squeal like an accusation. We carried a box of records for Eleanor, heavy, careful, like you carry a child who has fallen asleep on the way home. At Marin's Cafe, a woman in a blue coat held an empty cup like it was a relic. "My husband promised we'd come back here," she told us, smiling through something that wasn't quite sadness. "He died last winter. I thought coming alone would be like lying. It isn't. It's more like telling the truth slowly." Marin slid a paper token across the counter, a round chip stamped with a single letter, W. "For the road," she said. "Sometimes a token is all a person needs to decide." "What does the W stand for?" the woman asked. "Whatever you're willing to carry," Marin answered, "or put down." When she left, she tucked the token into her glove and stood a little taller. Eleanor arrived with her ledger, the one she calls the town's memory. She flipped to the last page and drew 3 neat columns: hands, head, heart. "Write something under hands," she said to me. "Do something under head, and leave heart open. That's the space where grace lands." So I wrote under hands, oiled the hinge so it stops complaining. Under head, I made a list of names to visit, people I owed a conversation: the baker, who still remembered the day Mary taught me not to burn toast, the librarian who had saved our first letter to the town, the boy who built small boats out of receipts and let the tide keep score, and heart I left blank. It felt right. That evening, the courtyard by the library filled the way it does when a town decides to be a living room. String lights swung a little in the breeze. A guitar found simple chords. The big wooden bowl waited on the table for offerings that weren't money: tokens, notes, a button from a coat that had kept someone warm through a bad winter. People told short stories, not speeches, never speeches. A widower held up a folded napkin with a lipstick kiss on it and said, "I kept this in my wallet for 20 years. Tonight, I think she finally told me I can let it breathe." A man with sailor's hands placed a compass whose needle had gone stubborn. "It always pointed to trouble. Maybe it will point to my daughter's porch now." When my turn came, I placed my own compass on the wood. "The needle never found north when she died," I said. "Today it wobbled, then settled. I won't pretend I know why. I just want to say it happened." Marin lifted the compass, considered its face, and set it gently back. "Sometimes north is not a direction," she said. "It's a decision to keep walking." After me, Sam stepped forward. He didn't bring the camera, he brought the envelope. He didn't open it. He just laid it in the bowl. "This found its way back to the right person," he said. "Now it needs to find the next. If you're the one it's been waiting for, you'll know when you touch it." No one reached for it, and that felt holy. A thing in motion doesn't need hands right away. It needs room. Night settled like a shawl. The lighthouse, which no one had officially fixed, threw a quiet beam over rooftops and water. I stood by the rail and watched it travel the old route across the harbor as if it were measuring time in patience instead of seconds. Sam joined me. "You ever think," he said, "that the people we lose become the part of us that keeps promises?" "I think the people we lose become the part of us that knows the way home," I said, "and they push, a little, when we stall." He nodded, then laughed softly. I used to think my job was to capture the truth. Lately, I wonder if it's to hold the door open for it. "Same job," I told him. "Different camera." We stayed there until the beam slipped off the last chimney and the town dimmed to its breathing. I won't pretend there was a single grand moment that solved everything. Instead, there were many small ones. Eleanor asked the mayor, a woman whose patience looks like iron-painted cream, to add a line to the official notice board. The next morning, beneath the ordinary schedule for buses and community hall meetings, someone had chalked Willow Creek, 6:52 a.m., if needed. No one questioned it. People in towns like this understand that some schedules are for trains and others are for hearts. You show up for both. The bakery began leaving one extra roll on the sill at dawn. For the traveler. Marin kept a small tin by the register labeled second tickets. Not money, just little paper tokens stamped with a W. The librarian set aside a shelf called Unsent Letters, where folks could place a note addressed to someone or something they weren't ready to mail. On Sundays, the shelf looked like a choir. On Mondays, it looked like relief. Sam launched an online project with a simple rule: no names, only first lines. People posted, "I stayed too long. I left too soon. I loved you the best way I knew, and then I learned a better way." He filmed the town, but quietly, like a man carrying soup. And me? I walked. I fixed things that complained. I learned the rhythm of faces at the station, the way hope changes a posture, the way grief sits down only when invited. Some mornings, no one came. On others, one person did. Sometimes, a pair. A girl with a backpack who had learned to speak softly to her own fear. A man who had promised a grandson he'd set foot on the platform he'd once run from. A woman with a blue coat who returned with the token in her glove and a new look in her eye. Not lighter, but steadier. Once at dawn, a boy arrived with a paper boat folded from a receipt. He placed it on the rail, whispering, "For Mom, in case the tide reads." The next day, the boat was gone. In its place, a smooth gray stone sat on the sill like a period at the end of a sentence that finally knew how to stop. The last thing that changed was the clock. For years, it had been stuck at 6:52. One morning, I looked up and saw the hands tremble, just a quiver, then settle back into stillness. "Did you see that?" I asked Eleanor. She smiled. "Clocks don't keep us. We keep each other." "Should we fix it?" I asked. "We already did," she said. "We showed up." I laughed because I finally understood. The clock had become a promise, not a measurement. Leave it be. On the first clear night of spring, we carried the wooden bowl to the station platform. Not a ceremony, a gathering. People set down what they were done carrying and picked up what waited for them. A token, a letter, a small bolt someone had polished from the old footbridge and turned into a charm. Moran passed paper cups of cocoa. Sam kept the camera in its bag and used his hands for hugging. I stood by the chalk line where the platform boards are worn smooth. And I said a few words, nothing official. Some trains take us away, some bring us back. This one taught me that coming back isn't the same as going in circles. It's arriving with better shoes. Laughter, the easy kind, the kind that agrees without needing to say so. A little before dawn, a thin mist braided the tracks. No headlight, no hum. but the silence felt full, like a held note. A young woman in a red scarf touched the envelope in the bowl, Mary's envelope, and pulled her hand back as if it were warm. She pressed her lips together, nodded to no one in particular, and sat down to wait. No one told her what to hope for. No one told her how long. That's not what platforms are for. When the first light of morning slid under the cloud edge, the lighthouse answered with its own slow sweep. The beam reached the station and kept going, then came back, as if to say, "I saw you. I'll see you again." Sam leaned close. "Do you ever miss the road you didn't take?" "All the time," I said, "but I've learned to wave at it instead of chasing it." He breathed out, almost a laugh. "I think that's what growing up is, even when you're 70-something. 70 and some change," I said. "Exact change. Finally." We stood there, two men with better shoes, while morning finished arriving. People ask sometimes if the train returned for me. I tell them the truth. It had already returned. It brought me to a town that remembers without punishing. It brought me to a platform that knows how to wait. It brought me to a young man who kept the door open for the kind of truth that hates being chased. It brought me back to Mary in the only way that lasts, by loving what she loved until it loved me back. If you ever find yourself lost, follow the rails, not because they always lead to a station, but because they teach your feet a rhythm. And if you ever arrive at Willow Creek near dawn, you may notice a small line on the notice board, written in careful letters. Willow Creek, 6:52 a.m., if needed. Maybe you'll hear a low humming. Maybe not. Either way, sit down, hold your letter. Let the morning look at you. When you feel brave, place what you carried in the wooden bowl. Take only what answers your name when you lift it. If the train comes, you'll know. If it doesn't, you'll still have done the bravest thing. You showed up. Either way, the light will find you. That's what it does. That's what we do when we remember. Harold Brown, keeper of small hinges, watcher of the 6:52, passenger who arrived and stayed.